All right. Welcome, nation. Thank you so much for stopping by. Check out another episode of Heart to Heart Conversations to Heal a Stressed and Broken Heart. Man, in this episode, I have a conversation with the and the only Eloisa Trinidad. Now, I still can't say her name right and pronounce the Spanish enunciation, but man, I'll tell you, she's incredible nonetheless. She is the executive director at Chills on Wheels, where she works to make veganism accessible to communities in need through policy, education, mentorship, and direct food relief. Now, in this episode, Eloisa and I, we discuss everything from life and liberty to food sovereignty. And here's my top 3 takeaways. Always be an advocate to the next generation and for those who are less fortunate. Number 2, we have to engage in social justice, which really this is all about the unalienable right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of food justice or the pursuit of health. And number 3, it's all about the culture. We have to make sure that we respect everyone's culture, because guess what? This fabric of the United States is made up of threads, individual threads. They are comprised of each of our own individual culture that is unique. And I'll tell you that it is rich with diverse types of foods that are rich in plant sources that can heal a broken heart. And so that's why we have to engage in this. And so this incredible episode that focuses on surrounding food sovereignty, it's not just about food, it's not just about food production, but it encompasses a broader social and environmental cultural dimensions. I hope you enjoy this episode. I know I did. Stay tuned. All right. It's good to see everyone. I hope everyone is well. Welcome back to another episode of Heart to Heart with Dr. Columbus Batiste. I so appreciate you spending just a few moments of your time with me today. And listen, I'm going to tell you, I know you probably think I say this all the time. I have an exciting guest. But this guest is different than the mode of what I normally go after in terms of trying to have a discussion. And so I'm really excited. I've had to dig and do some research. I feel like I've gone back to school just to educate myself, just priming for this individual. So today we have with us Eloisa Trinidad. All right. And so I know I'm horrible with my accents. I'm told this all the time at work and so forth, but she is an award-winning policy advocate, liberation and food activist, educator, artist, and she is the Renaissance woman. All right, so to speak. And so right now we're all going to have the pleasure of really learning from her, hearing her story, and figuring out how we can all become part of change, because that's what this is about. So welcome to the stage, Eloisa. How are you?
I'm so great. Thank you for having me. Those are some really kind and generous words. So thank you so much. I'm excited to get to know you today and be in conversation with you.
Yeah. And now, so for those who don't know, we don't know each other. This is the first time we've connected. I found her on LinkedIn. I saw some of her work that she had been doing. I had been kind of scoping her out with her work and just so impressed. And I reached out on a whim and she responded. She was like, who is this guy just hounding me? And we have her here today. So I'm excited. All right. So now, first thing I want you to do is I want you to correct my enunciation of your names. Go ahead and say it with all of the roles and everything else. I want to hear it right.
You did it well. You did a good job. It's Eloisa Trinidad. If you want to put in that Spanish accent, or Eloisa Trinidad. Way, but you did it.
No, I don't want the American. I don't want the American version. I want to roll my R's. I can't. I'm trying to do it, and I struggle. I practice it with
Trinidad.
my patients. I'm gonna work on that offline. I won't embarrass myself right now. But man, so listen, let's get to know each other right now real quick. And I'm unimportant, right? You're the important one. So, every good movie, I know you're an artist and we're going to dig into that. Do you watch movies? I mean, as with everything you're doing, do you watch movies?
I mean, I love film. I love independent film and, any type of art related films as well. I actually took a year of cinema when I was in college.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I don't make film, but I think that, where there's a story to be told, can be very impactful in how we influence people.
Absolutely. And I would tend to argue, I think that you are actually making a film because your life is a film. It's an evolution. It's telling a story, which is what it does. And one of the reasons why I ask that is that, my family is a movie addict. We love movies, whether it's superhero movies and or other action movies, and we recognize that there's always an origin story. There's always a beginning, a backstory. You may start at the end that, man, look at this incredible person, all the work that they're doing, their struggles or their success, but there's always a beginning. I want to dig into your beginning a little bit. What's your origin story? And
Yeah.
so
My
tell us about it.
yeah, my origin story starts, in a little island called Hispaniola on the Dominican side, and my family blending in also with a Peruvian family. So growing up, not just there, but then here, American, Peruvian, Dominican, and
Wow.
really being shaped by the folks who raised me, by my elders. And, I am who I am today because of them, because of everything they taught me, how they taught me to be in community, what they taught me about mutual aid, and what they taught me about, my life here on this planet and my relationship to all beings on this planet. And so it started there. I was very lucky to be from a family that, even though I was raised by people who were very, very old, I mean, they were centenarians. By the time they passed away, my great grandmother was 116 years old.
Wow. Wait, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. You how old? You said 100 and what?
At 116. Yeah, I
Wow.
compared this again with my grandfather recently, and she was very old and full of knowledge and wisdom, as was my great grandfather. And they also did not know how to read or write, and so everything that they passed down to me was through the power of the story and the power of
Yes.
doing and taking action. And so in our home, everybody was welcomed. Everybody who was rejected by society, we shared food with them. We even had places where they could sleep. And so taking action and sharing it with others and being in community has been a significant part of my life since I was a child.
Wow. I mean, there's so much there that can be unpacked, that so much research is really dug out before we even dig into the food aspect of it. When you speak to the fact of multi-generations living under one roof or being engaged, just the power of that's there, that really stays, highlight that, that's phenomenal. And
Yeah.
I had a limited benefit by having my grandparents would come back and forth before they ultimately lived in the home with us, with my mom. And now my mom lives with me, and my mom is 88, looks like she's 38. And she, interacting with my family, my kids. And so there's power that's there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I absolutely agree. There's so much power. And, as this child who was raised in this household that was multi-generational, I was always included in the conversation. I was always
Mm,
giving space to voice my thoughts and my opinions, whether it was at night having tea before bed or in the morning while everybody was having breakfast and cafecito. And I think that really gave me confidence to speak up in the world. And just also to push forward. I think that a lot of times children are silenced and they're not
yes.
trusted. And I grew up in a household where I was trusted. I was trusted to do the right thing. I wasn't yelled at or screamed at by the folks who raised me. I did have a very challenging life after that, but the formative years for me were just this sort of like space that was safe, where I could be who I was, where I could be the curious kid that I was. And I also understood how much it means and how valuable it is to really support curiosity in a child and
Yeah.
empathy. And so I was very lucky that those things and those parts of me were very much accepted in my household.
Oh, that's incredible. And I mean, that's such a blessing to grow up in an environment like that. I think that probably speaks volumes to a lot of your work that you do with the youth and education and so forth too, as well, is probably the foundation for that. So that's incredible. I think the other thing that really your story to this point brings out to me is really the power of like that. We found out a lot about isolation and loneliness and just that collective, that community that you speak to, that empowering, that really invigorates individuals and can really restore health. It's almost one of these things of like and we wonder about the paradox of how some people are able to thrive despite circumstances, right? Because where you grew up, I mean, is it a wealthy island? Is it not a wealthy island?
No, I mean, the difference that, between what we had and what others didn't is we had land to grow food, and that made a huge difference. So I understood that that was power. The food was power, the land was power, because we were able to be self-sustainable. But no, I grew up with, barely any electricity. We would go to the river to get water, no toilets, so it was an outhouse. But some of the most amazing, beautiful memories are of my great-grandparents telling me stories, by the moonlight, in front of the house, right on the front porch. And so I never felt that I lived in poverty because I had enough to eat, right? Even though I didn't have all of these luxuries, and we pretty much lived off the land. We grew most of our own food, and didn't have a refrigerator, so everything was made fresh every day. So, when people talk about zero waste and all of these things now, it's like shocking to me because I'm like, oh, this is how I grew up. I don't remember having like plastic bags or anything like that. But yeah, very much with Afro-Indigenous knowledge and ancestral knowledge. And my great-grandparents lived through a lot. They lived through one of the worst dictatorships in Dominican Republic. And so there was a lot there. Not only did I hear beautiful stories, but also very challenging stories as well that really taught me about how they persevered to survive on that island.
Yeah, that resiliency is so key, man. What a blessing. Sometimes we focus on all the positives of life, but not realizing that we're a sum total of our failures, of our experiences, of the adverse events that transpire. They really build and shape who we are, and there's power in that. We have to lean into it, so to speak, and accept it. But tell me about how you transition. So I would imagine that living from the land, it was predominantly plant-based, but I would imagine that there was some level of animal consumption from your family. I don't know, but so tell me about that, and if so, how you transitioned over.
Yes, highly plant-based. I think that's why fruit is still my favorite food until this day. I love fruit. And I remember my great-grandfather just always bringing me different types of fruit and explaining plants to me, and all of these things. But even though they taught me about my connection to other beings, so I remember my great-grandfather, while we are out there in what we call a conuco, which is where we grow food, telling me about the little worm that needs to live, and that, there was a little worm on the mango, and that just put the worm back on the ground because the little worm is trying to survive just like you are. But then we'd go fishing, and when we would go fishing, it didn't make sense to me that there was a treatment for this other animal a certain way, and then a different treatment for this fish that we were catching to eat. And so that was really, for me, a very important point in my life where I realized as a child, being 6 or 7 years old, that I didn't want to do this. I'm like, someone's suffering here, and I don't want to take part in this suffering, and I don't like what I'm seeing. And so I really took that Afro-Indigenous and ancestral knowledge that was passed down to me, that was taught to me, and just took it a step further and said, I'm just going to include everyone in this process. And, I want to have this relationship with others on this being where I limit or eliminate the suffering that I'm causing.
Wow. How old were you when you had this?
Oh, I was a little kid. I think I was like 6 or 7, and yeah, it was I was an interesting child. I mean, I'm glad I had the parents that I did, because I don't know if others could have handled me. But I would bring every animal home. I mean, stray cats, dogs, a rabbit, a turtle, any animal that I felt needed a home, I would bring them home. I rescued some little birds, you know, sometimes when the bird falls off the nest, the mother doesn't take the bird back. And so I had some birds as well that I rescued. So this has been an ongoing journey since childhood, because, you know, I just have felt that connection to other beings. And because it was supported by the folks that raised me, it just further developed. I think that all children really have that connection to other beings from early on. And it's really up to the adults in their life to develop and sustain that empathy that exists in all of us.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's such a beautiful story. And I mean, I think first of all, I think it acknowledges your family, because I assume that they fully supported your decision in order to eat this pattern. Is that correct?
Yes, they absolutely did. You know, I think to them in some ways it was like, okay, you know, more rice and beans for you, or, you know, but they have always supported it. You know, my mother, she's not vegan yet. She's like 99% plant-based, but they have always supported it, have been very proud of the path that I have taken. And which is shocking, because, you know, a lot of times in a lot of different cultures, whether you're from Latin America or, you know, or not, there is a lot of attachment to food, right? Food is culture, it's experience, it's the history of who we are. And animals are seen as just, you know, meats, as other bodies that we eat and that we're entitled to. And so I've been very lucky that they have been supportive.
Oh, no, no, that is. And I think the other thing it brings out is the fact that many kids, right, they're taught to hate. They're taught the aspects of division and the impact in terms of fear. And these things are brought up to kids as opposed by adults. And so sometimes we have to follow the kids, let the children lead us. And so clearly your family was embracive of you leading out in that direction. And I think there's a ton of power with that. So tell me about when did you move to the United States, and how was the transition? How were you able to maintain this same sort of tunnel vision with all the distractions of American around you at an early age?
Well, out of all places, we moved to New York. So you can imagine the culture shock that I experienced. I remember very vividly having a computer and, you know, someone lending that computer, letting somebody use it, and another person telling me, why are you doing that? Like, that person can steal your computer. And that didn't even cross my mind, right? Because I'm like, oh, that person just needs to use my computer. But yeah, I was almost 11 years old, and I thought I was coming here for a couple of months. So I had this extreme culture shock. And then when my mother finally told me that I would be living here permanently, I was just not happy. I was shocked. I was sad. I was upset. You know, this was the first time that I started living with my mother, my biological mother, even though obviously I knew her growing up, and my great-grandmother raised her as well. Yeah, it took a while, but I definitely consider myself a New Yorker as well now. And I think because that influence was so strong and those roots are so strong, I never let it go. It has been what has kept me centered. Everything that was passed down to me has been what kept me centered. I mean, there are so many distractions, there's so many things, and a lot of challenging and terrible things that also happened in my life. And I always go back and say that if I didn't have that foundation, I don't think I would be here. I don't think I would have had that resiliency and that perseverance to really continue. And so, yeah, it's just at the center, it's at the root. And, you know, these roots are not ever going to be pulled out. They're there permanently. I can't hear you. I think you're muted.
Well,
there you go.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So the host needs to be prompted by the guest. What's going on? Thank you. But, you know, one of the things I mentioned, though, is the fact that in my lectures, a lot of times what I talk about is that our health, whether it's our physical health, our mental health, it's really, I boil it down to an equation: our resiliency divided by our stress. We can't eliminate stress from impacting us in life, things, the life events, whatever it may be, but our resiliency can really determine our outlook and what begins to happen. And this is what I'm hearing from you. And that's powerful. And so, you know, what's interesting, one of the things that really captivated me about your story is even inside of your bio, inside of your LinkedIn, it talks about the fact of how you're an advocate, that you advocate for liberation as well as food activists, and that you're unabashedly vegan. And so how did these worlds collide? I mean, how did you, I mean, clearly I'm starting to see the threads of how this came together, but tell me about that and about your story with that.
Yeah, so, you know, once I started this journey from the Dominican Republic and then moving here, I didn't want to eat anything. I also thought that the plant-based food here tasted horrible when I got here. And so from very early on, I started doing activism. I started researching. I think one of the first ways in which I was an activist was taking a clipboard and protesting against Monsanto. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know, this is a terrible corporation. Can you please sign this petition? But I didn't know what the word vegan was. I didn't know that it even existed, right? I just knew that I felt a certain way and that I wanted to take action to prevent that harm. And so I didn't come into the word vegan or veganism later on, I think about high school. So in middle school, I started researching different things. And what I came across was a lot of Eastern philosophies of nonviolence. And then beyond that, more indigenous philosophies of, you know, taking care of the earth that supported the Afro-Indigenous, you know, teachings that I had received. And so that's what I dedicated pretty much my middle school years to, was continuing to research and find others who thought like me, because I wanted to learn more. You know, during this time, it wasn't like Google was available and you could just Google everything. So I was going to the library and reading books and reading different books on Taoism, Buddhism, Hinduism. I mean, you name it. I was trying to figure it out. And I think
Wait, in middle school you were doing this? In middle
school, yeah. I love reading.
You mean you were going like Dewey Decimal System to the library and pulling up books, old school. I know the new listeners out there don't know about Dewey Decimal System.
Yeah. And I didn't find anything on veganism itself. And so all I kept finding was all these different philosophies. And so that's what I learned about. And that, I think, shaped some of my beliefs as well. And just to always remember that all of us at some point have caused harm, and to walk with humility and in humility, because I think that for a lot of folks that can be challenging, for a lot of us that can be challenging at times, but especially within the animal rights movement, I think a lot of folks go vegan and then forget that at one point they weren't vegan, right? And that, you know, all of a sudden, once you become vegan, it doesn't mean that you vilify others. You can definitely raise awareness and hold systems and corporations and people accountable, but we have to be strategic about it as well. And so, yeah, that led to a path of activism. You know, I was already an activist as a kid in Dominican Republic through the work that my family was doing. We just didn't call it activism. You know, we just pushed to do the right thing by others. And the first person I advocated for, I remember vividly, was this old, very, very old blind woman who lived near a church. And, you know, truth be told, I only went to this church to get free coloring books because I'm an artist, and they would just give out these coloring books and coloring pencils. So I was like, oh yeah, you know, let me go with my friends to get the freebies. And she lived right near this church, and she was by herself, and nobody would visit her. She lived in a tiny little hut. And to me, it didn't make sense. I didn't understand why she was by herself, why the church was not supporting her. And I was just angry about it. And she's like, I was like, where are your kids? Where is everybody? And yeah, that was the first person, one of the first people that I really first felt very strongly about advocating for, was this woman who was, you know, pretty much bedridden, and nobody was really there for her, and she needed companionship.
Wow. Man. Okay. So So much to unpack there with what you just brought forth. I mean, I think first, kind of going back, and I have to get back to this lady with who you first advocated for, but I think the first thing that struck me with what you were describing is the fact that many people believe that this vegan movement, or this awareness of this consciousness of the foods we eat and the interaction with the environment and animals and nature, that it all began here in the 20th century, that it somehow all just began with a dominant population. But you speak to roots inside the Latina population, you know, your culture that's there. And your research really validated a lot of those things. We're looking at, like, what is our ethos with life? What's our perspective on life and our being, our place that's there? That's powerful, because I think many people assume that this is a new phenomenon, that it's not something that individuals inside of Afro-Latina predominant populations have really engaged in. And you speak to the opposite of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is why my framework is anti-colonial, is because of that. Obviously, we cannot lump all indigenous groups together. There are indigenous groups across the world that, you know, eat a highly animal-based diet, based on the fact that they live in areas where vegetation is not abundant. And so, you know, our ancestors who were brought here from Africa, who are displaced indigenous people, I think a lot of times we forget, you know, about Black indigeneity, and that these folks were indigenous to that land and had all this indigenous knowledge, right? A lot of those folks already had that connection to the earth, and were stewards of the earth, and were in this symbiotic relationship. And then you have indigenous folks of Abya Yala, of the Americas, of Turtle Island, you know, with a similar relationship. Now, was there animal exploitation there? Of course. But when you look at that versus the factory farming system that we have today, as much as folks may try to say those are one and the same thing, they're not one and the same thing. And we have to be really careful of how we address these issues, because there are a lot of people within the animal rights movement that are anti-indigenous, that are anti-indigeneity, because they feel that people use it as an excuse to exploit animals. And of course, culture is not an excuse to exploit anyone, regardless of their species. But I think it's really important for us to tailor and localize our strategies, and how we're going to approach this idea of animal liberation and collective liberation in order to move forward and actually achieve it. And remembering that indigenous folks throughout the world, whether they're in Africa, whether they're in Asia, whether they're in the Americas, are protecting over 80% of global biodiversity. And that's a heck ton of work. And we need to really come together. And for those of us who have had our indigeneity erased, right, or denied, we have to continue connecting and reconnecting to that knowledge that, you know, is in our DNA. We don't just, you know, carry trauma in our DNA. We carry knowledge, and we carry resiliency, and we carry all of this intelligent and amazing information to help us shape the future that we want to see.
Oh, I love it. I love it. You know, in the healthcare field, I mean, I talk to, in my lectures, I always speak to the fact that we're all on this journey of life. I may be at the 15-mile mark of a 26.2-mile marathon, and another person may be at within the first mile itself, right? But I have to encourage that person. I can't bemoan them because they're not where I'm at, or that I'm not where the other person is at. We have to do our best to bring people up with love and care and concern, acknowledging who they are, where they're at, and moving towards an improved state. Now, some may argue that there's not enough time for that we have to act now and everyone has to change magically. But just like you mentioned, we all have come from somewhere. We all have started somewhere, at some place where we're a different version of ourselves today than we were before. And so I think the care, and what's lacking in this world a lot of times, is a level of empathy, is love. Oftentimes we speak about love for our fellow beings, and that's across the board, both our human counterparts and our animal counterparts, and working together. And I think that's powerful, really, in your messaging of inclusivity, I think it's extremely important. So bravo for that.
Thank you. And, I just want to add that, besides supporting folks and encouraging behavior change, that's also very limiting. We have to create the systems that are going to support behavior change. Yes. We have to continue striving for systemic change. And I think it's very easy a lot of times to blame the individual and, focus on the individual, right? Because you have a person in front of you who you could just scream at. And don't get me wrong, I think that there is a place for that. And there is a place to, have accountability and say to someone, this is wrong. And, this is unjust for another person or another being. But we have to remember that we don't live in a vegan world. We live in a world where, our beyond human relatives are exploited in each and every way. And within that exploitative systems, there is other exploitation happening to humans as well, and a complete destruction of our planet. And so, supporting folks in their journey so we get there, and empowering folks in that journey, right? Because everybody has a role in the fight for liberation, but also really striving to create those systems that are going to support and encourage that change. Man,
perfect transition into another topic. But before we do that, in terms of systematic change, right, in providing structure for individuals, which really digs into the politics of things, and which is the political determinants of health, which becomes extremely important. I want to kind of turn back just for a moment, just because it's so powerful when you speak to the fact that many indigenous individuals around the world, they ate from the land, and that's incorporated in who they are. And one of the things I can speak to as an African American is the fact that a lot of times there is a perception that my culture is soul food. And that's really not who we are. For the enslaved, that was not their original diet. Their original diet hailed from Africa, which means it was plentiful. It was rich in fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things of that nature that was there. And so this is a microcosm. It's a makeshift that we had to get acclimated to what was around us. And a lot of times I speak to all of us, we have to tap into resiliency. So just like the enslaved, where they tapped into, they grew farms and they learned, brought their knowledge before of living off the land, that they were actually able to cultivate many of that into their dishes amidst like the need of what they had in front of them. And so it's my stance is always encouraging to tap into the culture of the individual that you're speaking to. Tap into the good things that are there, of the rich fruits and vegetables and whole grains that may be there, maybe the three sisters, if corn and squash and so forth, and beans, and going from variables that are there. And anyway, that's my reflection on some of that, what you mentioned.
Yeah, can I add something to that? I think that, for me as well, I like to come from a place of abundance, because that's what I was taught. I was taught that there is enough for everyone, and that enough exists, right, for ourselves as well. And so when I'm speaking to folks, I point out to them that they already may be wearing, a hemp fabric that is, animal free, or that they may be wearing or buying products already that are not tested on animals. And that, as you said, that they're eating plants already. We just have to eat, all of it, as in our diet, right? We want to make that shift and that change. And I think it's very important. And it's also important to remember that African folks, our ancestors were brought here because of their agricultural knowledge, not because they were big, large, and strong, but it was because they had all of this knowledge that, unfortunately was used in order to enslave them, and then to create this economic system for others, right? For colonizers. And so it's really important for us to carry that. Recently, I heard one of the things that shocked me when I came here was that a lot of Black folks here talk about Black people not swimming or not being able to swim. And while I understand like the historical context as to why, and segregation and things not being made available and accessible, I'm like, oh my gosh, I pretty much grew up on the water. And, we have to remember that we have created so many different traditions throughout, and not to vilify the fact that, enslaved ancestors had to resort to creating food out of whatever was available, but to understand that that means that they had such strength and creativity in surviving. And so that creativity has led to us flourishing and to us being here and existing today. I mean, I think it takes a lot of strategic thinking in order to survive what our indigenous and African ancestors were able to survive.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It brings to mind, before I ask you my first off-wall question, is the old movie. Once again, I told you I'm a movie guy. Trading Places with Eddie Murphy back in the day. And so this is probably preceded you. You probably have never seen this movie, but Trading Places was Eddie Murphy, a comedian, and Dan Aykroyd. And so Eddie Murphy is someone, a homeless person on the street. And Dan Aykroyd, a Caucasian man who's gone through Ivy League school and given all this. So these rich guys decide to make a bet. The bet ends up being $1, to see that if they could change the circumstances. One rich brother bet that Eddie Murphy would flourish. The other one said no way he would. And Eddie Murphy, when given the opportunity, flourished and became this successful business person, while Dan Aykroyd, when faced with the other constraints, became what was viewed as this indigent and so forth. And so circumstances really matter. Opportunity matters. And what's so important, as you mentioned, that's so beautiful, is that when you begin to look and parse through the beauty of survival, of resiliency that's layered in many cultures, but obviously it becomes clearly evident to me in terms of the African-American culture of individuals who've succeeded despite the adversities that are amongst them, whether or not it's in culinary arts or whether or not it's inside any particular area, is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. Now, question for you. You said you love fruit. Yes. Give me your top five favorite fruit.
This is too difficult. I'm just gonna say all tropical fruits, also berries. I mean,
no.
Persimmons, mango, watermelon. Oh my gosh, watermelon. I love watermelon, and again, very shocked that there's like a racializing of watermelon here, because I grew up eating so much watermelon. Mango, obviously, top. Oh my gosh, there's so many. I feel like if I choose one, I'm like cheating on all the others.
You have to give me top five. Make a decision.
Oh,
so I heard watermelon, mango. I heard persimmon,
mango, pineapples, all the tropical fruits, really. Dragon fruit. I mean, they're all so good. Mamey. Oh my gosh, mamey is another delicious fruit. I
never had that.
Oh, it's so good. Really, like the mamey smoothie is just delicious. There's so much.
Oh, that's good.
So
that's
yeah, there's so many.
All right. I won't pin you down too much there and make the other fruit mad at you, but that's good. That's good. Now I have one that you're gonna have to tell me about that naming again. I have to look for that particular fruit, lamé, there again. No, that's good. So you brought up in terms of like systems issue and the importance of systems. And so you've done a lot of work in terms of on the political front. You started off, like you mentioned, about advocating when you're in junior high school. But tell me about your work from like systems and structure and so forth on the political front there, whether or not it's a farm bill and different bills that are being proposed out there. And tell me about the importance, tell our audience about the importance of working on that vein.
Yeah, absolutely. I realized very early on in my life that, although it's really great to be in community and build all of these different systems that aid, in the transformation of the planet, if folks that are, have more power destroy all those efforts, we definitely need to strive towards that systemic level change. And so I really got involved in political advocacy very young, around high school. I'm not a big fan of government. I'll keep it at that. And so the policy work that we're doing now is multi-layered and multi-level. So Chili's on Wheels and Vegan Activist Alliance, which are the two organizations that I'm a part of, we focus on bills that impact humans, animals, and the environment. Some of those bills address the underlying issues as to why people don't have access to either food or education, or even employment, because that impacts the decisions that we make regarding the food we eat and the things that we purchase. We also work a lot with the youth, and so we have bills that advocate for plant-based food across the country, with an emphasis on organic foods as well. And really to increase access of plant-based food and to put an end to factory farming. And so our bills are varied, but I am a strong believer that we cannot just work on the surface level things, but also on the underlying structures that are holding them up. And so it's really important for us to involve the community in this advocacy as well. I think policy advocacy can seem like such a challenging thing to get into or to understand. But once you make it accessible, I mean, with our youth program, there's just we get so much interest on it, where we have to turn really amazing qualified youth down because our program is really tailored, right? There's it's a BIPOC, mostly BIPOC youth from across the country, and they're working so hard to advocate for a youth council at the USDA. They're working again to end the EATS Act. I mean, there's just so many different bills that could impact even employment, right? There's folks that are being exploited that are picking our fruit, right? The fruit that I love so much. And so it's a really multi-layer approach, because regardless of what we do at the grassroots level, if folks at the top continue to undo those efforts, then we're going to be stuck back at one. And again, to what I said earlier, we have to create the systems and transform the systems that support that behavior change. And so that's what we're looking to do. And we're fighting really hard, and we have different campaigns. You know, children for me are very important, even though I don't have any, and advocating for them that they can have a fair start to life is extremely important. You know, if you're in school and you're not eating and you're not focusing and you're not concentrating, it's going to be very challenging to study and to be an advocate, you know, for anything. And so we have to really make sure that we have a foundation that makes children thrive, and that makes them into amazing citizens that want to also take care of the planet and of the world.
I love it. I love it. I love it. No, I think on multiple layers. And one, you're almost essentially, you're allowing these individuals to become apprentice to learn the political structure that you said, hey, I'm not a big fan of it, but they're learning the system of how to navigate, how to advocate for what they believe in, which is important. That can be of good to themselves and to others. And you mentioned your organizations and so forth. Tell us a touch about. I was so impressed about the Chills on Wheels organization and what you're doing with that. Tell us a little bit more in detail about that.
Yeah, so Chills on Wheels was started almost 10 years ago by Michelle Carrera. She's a queer Puerto Rican woman, and she was a single mother and experiencing food insecurity at the time. Her and her son, Ali, were both vegan and are still vegan. And she wanted to give back to the community. And so she didn't find a vegan soup kitchen, and she said, I'm going to do this myself. Started giving out chili, plant-based chili to the community, to unhoused folks. And then from there, we grew into an organization and into a national network. When I took over the organization, so we were only direct food relief. When I took over the organization, I expanded the mentorship and education and the policy work as well, in order to really, again, address all of those issues and create an organization, or further evolve an organization into how I saw, how I saw it and what we could become. And it has been really great. And Michelle's one of my good friends and mentor. And, when she stepped down, I was really honored that she felt I was the right person to take over and to lead this organization. And yeah, that's what we do. You can find us doing anything from, feeding our folks that are on the corner or going to a school to distribute healthy organic food and produce, or on Capitol Hill, with our youth steering committee, or even advocating at the local level with the Office of Food and Nutrition Services in our schools here in New York City. And so different levels of advocacy to be able to really work towards this world that we want to see.
Oh man, that's incredible. That's incredible. So, I mean, how does someone really get involved with Chili's on Wheel, or how do they say, hey, you know what, I want to bring this to my area. We have a lot of homelessness and we believe that there's more that we can do. What would their approach be in terms of reaching out to your organization?
Yeah, you can find us online. It's just Chili's on Wheels, or you can email me, eloise@chilisonwheels.org. And, one thing to clarify is that, food insecurity and hunger doesn't have a phase. No. You can come from any background, you can look any way, in any way, and you never know who's food insecure. And in this country, we have over 50 million Americans, and most of those are families with children. And so, we serve to the community, and we serve to folks that may just be curious about plant-based food. So yeah, just finding us online and sending us a message, they can get involved. And if you want to start something in your community, we can support you in that. One of the things that we do is we first engage with the community, because it's really important for the community to be part of the efforts. We are not in the business of telling community how they should find their solutions. We feel that the community always knows best, and they inform us, and we just provide that support.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's powerful. And what I want to do is I want to take just a moment for individuals of our audience who may not be familiar with some terminology. So first, BIPOC. One, I'll have you touch on that. Two, food insecurity, food deserts, food justice. Give us a spiel on what those terminologies mean to you.
Yeah, and I'll just preface that with saying that I don't like some of these terms. So, the term BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color. There's another term, which is BIPGM, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of the global majority, because we are the global majority, and there's power in recognizing that. And I think a lot of times people use the word food desert when they really mean food apartheid. And so, here in New York City, we have food all around us, right? But folks don't necessarily have the funds to be able to access the food. You could have a Whole Foods in your neighborhood and not have the money. And so when we look at food injustice from that angle, we really understand that the issues may not be a food desert, which really technically is where there isn't any food, or the food is so far away that it's very hard to access. But we look at all of the different structural issues and problems that are upholding this unjust system, right? And a lot of it tied to, racist history and destruction of food systems as well. And then when we talk about food justice, food justice, I prefer the term food sovereignty. I think food justice is we take care of people right here and now, and they have access to eat. But food sovereignty really looks at empowering community, and the community having the power to make the decisions that are better for them, for the planet, and for other beings. Like having land and being able to grow food, or being able to purchase food, and being able to make those decisions. So there's a difference there. And, I like to think that we're fighting for plant-based food sovereignty, where folks have that power and are able to make those decisions on their own, versus just us or any organization providing immediate relief, right? We're striving for that sovereignty while providing that justice.
I love that. Love it. Love it. Love it. Not really anything to add to that. I mean, that was powerful and well summarized. I mean, I think the one thing I think when I look at food insecurity, and what I bring up to folks is, I think it's why it's so powerful to me as a physician and clinician, is because when you look at the FAO definition of it, they really kind of define it, so to speak, as someone who lack regular access to safe and nutritious food. So I always emphasize nutritious food, right? That's food that's important for growth and development and prevention of disease. And we understand that that is seeped inside of whole food, plant-rich foods. And we know that it's not inside of animal bodies, as you say, or animal meats. And we know that it's not inside of really the processed, refined, factory-driven foods that are really surrounding, and they fill many of these food insecure communities that I personally grew up in. And so I think it's important. And so that means that impacts so many people across many different demographics too as well. And unfortunately, some more than others. So this leads us to question number 2, right? Give me your top 5 guilty pleasures.
Top 5 guilty pleasures. Okay. I think dancing.
You said dancing?
Dancing, right? I think that sometimes I'll just start dancing in my apartment because I just need to move, and I will put work aside and just get completely distracted. Definitely dancing and anything with the arts. As an artist, I can get very lost in that world, right? There's always that struggle of like, oh, do I go and advocate today, or do I go and create art and just stay by myself in my solitude and my creativity? Another one. I'm trying to think. Guilty pleasures. Perhaps wasting a lot of time reading. I mean, I think reading is good, but I think also you can just go down that hole of like researching, and there's more, and there's more, and there's more, and there's more to learn. And also I think a lot of people experience that, especially now with us having access to so much information, right? Just like Googling one thing and ending up reading like a research paper on it, and never stopping. So that's another thing. Another guilty pleasure. One more at least, right? I don't know if I could do 5.
One more. Even if it's like food, like what's a guilty pleasure food that you have that you're like, this may not be best for me, but what is your thing?
So I don't think that this is unhealthy. I'll just say that I think that there's a lot of negative information. I think obviously there's some issues there, but I really I love white rice. I think like white rice, white rice. Yeah. I love plants. I love root vegetables, and one of my favorite root vegetables is yuca, which is cassava. It's really just amazing. But there's something like about white rice with avocado that I love. Just that taste. Or white rice with tomatoes. I don't know. There's like an umami taste there that I really like and enjoy. And I think it just goes back to childhood where, I grew up eating a lot of white rice with avocado. And I think for some folks, they vilify everything that's not a whole grain, obviously, but I think I definitely like some white rice.
Well, I think if white rice is your guilty pleasure, we all need to have you're the perfect person for interviewing. When you interview, they always say, turn your negative into a positive. So what this young lady has said is she said, well, I like to dance, which means I get physically active. I bring joy to my life. That's a guilty pleasure. I love to read. And I love to eat really a version of a really solid whole food that's there in terms of rice and tomatoes. But that's one. I love it. I
can get distracted, I guess, was the point, right? With the dancing and the researching, and I can get very distracted,
Now, one of the things that intrigued me, and a lot of folks may not know a whole lot about it, is that you're also involved with an organization called HipHop Is Green. Or you were, or is that still? So tell us about that.
Yeah, I was involved. I obviously can't do all of it, so I had to step down. But HipHop Is Green is a great organization, and they use hip hop as a vehicle for change. And they're very much focused on food justice. They also include, obviously, animals in it, because one of the main focus of the organization is the relationship that we have to animals and to nature, to the natural world. And so the organization was started by folks who were involved in the hip hop industry in one way or another, by Keith Tucker. And yeah, it's been going on. I think they're about 10 years old, and they engage the youth through hip hop music and positive hip hop, and really maintain what hip hop is about. And they even have a small farm out in Seattle, so
oh, wow.
A community garden where they grow food, and really engage the youth through that, and teaching them, you know, ways to grow food and become self-sustainable.
That's great. That's great. So many organizations out there doing great work. And I know you're an artist, and I'm not going to at first I was going to limit you to saying, tell me your top 5 rappers of all time, but I won't do that. Let's say your top 5 music artists.
Oh my gosh. So I will say this. I am the worst at this top 5 or favorite.
That's why I like this for you. I see it. That's why I keep going in.
I'm one of those people that just like freezes. I don't know. There's so much music that I like. But I will say,
tell me the last 3 that you've listened to.
The last 3 that I listened to. So there's this young man. I think he's just a Black American man that does this really just amazing mixture of soft rock and alternative music. I think it's pronounced David. I'm not sure how it's like the spelling is different. It's like D4V. So okay. I don't know how the 4 gets in there. And I heard him just yesterday, and there's so many young folks making really amazing music. And so that was probably one of the last songs that I heard, and just really, you know, touches your soul and gets you into that sort of, you know, soft, chilled mood. And yeah, in the lyrics, you know, the lyrics are good.
No, that's great. That's great. Yeah, it's full disclosure, I'm horrible with the top 5 and top 3. That I think that's why in part I like to freeze folks up and ask them that too as well. But no, that's good. I think let's round things off with 2 things. What are you most proud of in terms of what you've accomplished? Because you've accomplished a lot. And I mean, I think you're worth following. You're worth people knowing about you and supporting all your ventures and what you're doing to kind of bring the world to a better place, in terms of food and justice and liberation. And there's a lot of power that's there. So tell me about that. What are you most proud of?
Thank you. Thank you for those generous words. I think that for me, I'm always trying to fill the shoes of those who raised me. And, you know, if in some way my great-grandparents are proud of me, wherever they are, whatever we call heaven or another life, then maybe that's what I'm proud of, just that they are proud of me. But I think what I take most pride in is really coming together with others and building community and coalition and collaborating. I don't think we will achieve liberation unless we continue to learn to work in collaboration with one another and each other. I think that's critical. And I hope that I get better at it. I hope that we all come together and really understand that, you know, our most creative strategies often come from being in community with one another.
Wonderful. That's great. I say the same thing in a different sense, is that, you know, my whole why is really, I always kind of describe it as like me paying penance to those members of my family where I was not knowledgeable to lend them the help regarding lifestyle. And they suffered as a result of my lack of knowledge, my ignorance. And so my job now is to inform as many people as possible, and at least plant seeds that individuals can kind of take hold and structure as best I can from my own particular angle. So thank you for all that you do. I appreciate you for who you are, for the family and the generational wealth of knowledge and experience that they implanted inside of you to allow you to kind of perform to the level that you perform at. Where can people find you? Where do you want them to find you? On social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook?
Everywhere. Thank you so much for having me. It was great to just, you know, be in conversation with you and laugh and you know, be joyful. People can find me on LinkedIn, Eloisa Trinidad, or on social media, Elogata, and on there you'll see the different organizations that I'm involved in. And yeah, I'm on Twitter. I don't stay active much, but if you want to see a lot of anti-colonial tweets, definitely follow me on Twitter. Yeah, just grateful for the opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us. And I'm going to tell you, we definitely need to collaborate. I have certain things in the pocket. This is a busy woman, y'all. Okay. So I'm not even going to put my chips there that this is going to happen. But if we can collaborate in the future on a lot of your efforts and at least some of the things I'm doing, I'd love to. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all for spending your time with us for this past hour. I hope you've enjoyed it like I've enjoyed this conversation. This is all new and refreshing to me, so I've thoroughly enjoyed you and spending our time here together this morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're tuning in. But make sure you like this Heart to Heart on Chef AJ's channel, or check out Healthy Heart Doc on the YouTube too as well. Make sure you stay tuned for my new book coming out called Selfish, right? A Cardiologist's Guide to Curing a Stressed and Broken Heart is coming out, where a lot of these principles we discussed today, I'll go into depth in some of the research. But thanks again, and look forward to connecting soon.